By the way, I used to go to this school.
Okay. Ay.
Robert Land Academy was a military-style boarding school that I was sent to when I was 14 for flunking the 9th grade. I skipped most of my classes that year to play World of Warcraft and watch anime. I arrived late to my first day at RLA. After a 2-hour drive from Toronto, we pulled into the school, which sat in the middle of nowhere in Wellingport, Ontario. I was greeted by a student and a staff member in fatigues. They calmly took my bag, saying that they'd return my belongings the next time I left campus, which ended up being months later. As soon as my parents left, they started to yell at me for being late. I was told to follow them while kicking my knees up to my chest. Next, my head was shaved, and they handed me a pair of coveralls. I was taken to a room with at least 50 boys facing the wall while staff and older students screamed. Soon, they ordered me to do burpees until I was too exhausted, and I just kind of collapsed. 4 men stood over me shouting. The one who was screaming the loudest was a veteran of the Canadian Airborne Regiment, an elite unit disbanded for its actions in Somalia. To avoid a lawsuit, I'll be using the names of G.I. Joe characters for anyone who isn't a public figure. So I'll call the Airborne guy CSM Duke. I was later told that CSM Duke said, "I smell a Somali," right before screaming in my face. He was no doubt referring to me, as I was the only ethnically Somali person in the room that day, probably in the school's entire history. As he kept screaming at me, I felt a sudden urge to escape. When I tried to run towards the exit, Duke claimed that I swung at him. I didn't, but that didn't really matter. The 4 men around me, they tackled me, and it was the first time that I was restrained at RLA. Over the next year and a half, I'd see many students tackled for the smallest of infractions. I was completely unaware at the time that restraining students as a disciplinary tactic was illegal. Before it recently shut down, Robert Land Academy was the only military-style boarding school in Canada. RLA had no affiliation with the Canadian military. It was a private school for troubled teens that was home to 160 boys a year, mostly with learning disabilities and behavioral disorders. RLA was founded by Scott Bowman, a former camp counselor who claimed to be a NATO spy that did top-secret missions for the IDF. In the mid-90s, his story was proven to be completely fabricated.
False. Yeah.
But when I was a student there, we had to call him Colonel Bowman and salute him anyway. Bowman believed that physical discipline and total control were the best ways to fix troubled teenage boys. But instead of helping boys, he just kind of created an environment that was ripe for abuse. Since opening its doors almost 50 years ago, the school gained notoriety for everything from hiring convicted criminals to the deaths of 3 students. I was sent to Robert Land because I had a deep sense of apathy towards school. My life has always been ruled by single-minded obsession. Right before I arrived at RLA, that obsession was World of Warcraft. I wanted an epic mount in World of Warcraft more than I wanted a driver's license. I didn't really care about anything else. Many RLA students were kids that were in trouble with the law. Some were sent by youth probation officers. So it was kind of a weird mix, because while I was at home playing World of Warcraft, some of the kids in my barracks were jacking cars and selling hard drugs. I like to joke that I arrived there not knowing what ketamine was, and less knowing how to traffic it internationally. Every morning at Robert Land, we woke up at 6 a.m., bright lights suddenly flashed on, and staff members screamed until we got out of bed. Our days revolved around academics, kid inspections, drill, and PT. We learned to shine combat boots and fold clothes to exact measurements. The staff used rulers during kid inspection, so if your shirts weren't folded exactly 30 centimeters long, they'd tear your whole cubicle apart. I brought the same apathy that I had towards public school with me to RLA. So I stayed a recruit for my entire first year, which was pretty remarkable. I mean, most of the students in my recruit course were promoted to cadet within like 3 weeks. There were 3 ways to excel at the school: have perfect kit, be good at drill, and do well academically. Kids who did well were promoted. They were given medals as well as perks like dessert and Friday night movies. But none of those rewards really motivated me enough to try. So I was constantly punished for not getting with the program. I did so many push-ups that I went from being able to do 0 to 100 in a month. One time for 2 weeks straight, I stood facing the wall at attention for 14 hours a day, only getting breaks to use the washroom, eat outside, and sleep. I was always on labor detail as a punishment. So instead of going to class, I'd dig holes all day, or scrap ice off the lap track, or deep clean the mess hall. But honestly, being on labor meant that I didn't have to go to class, and I kind of preferred it that way. You know, the human body adapts very quickly, especially when you're 14 years old. Eventually, nothing they threw at me felt very punishing. All of the exercise and physical labor, it became easier than breathing. But what really helped me at the time was my mindset. This is going to sound extremely dorky, but I used the punishments like a training arm. I saw it as the hyperbolic time chamber. I kept thinking about this one manga panel from Naruto, the one that's on screen right now, and I just kept thinking, yeah, that's me. When I was at RLA, exercise became my new single-minded obsession. I was being physically punished all day, but still doing push-ups and dips in my cubicle before bed. So my first year at RLA wasn't actually that bad. It was my second year. That second year broke me. But before I say how that happened, I want to tell you more about CSM.
Bro, any school that's treating you in that type of manner is not right, but we have a lot of those in the States.
Duke was the company sergeant major of B Company, which was my company. He was respected because he was a paratrooper. Duke walked with a limp from low-altitude helicopter jumps. He'd wake us up an hour early for runs, leading the pack while hobbling on wrecked knees. He'd run like 30 kilometers on messed up knees, but he'd still be lapping kids. It was incredible. Honestly, I have mixed feelings about him. Yes, he was a bully, but he was also undeniably charismatic. In 1992, Duke's airborne unit deployed to Somalia at the beginning of the Somali Civil War for a peacekeeping mission. Their job was to escort aid convoys, clear mines, rebuild infrastructure, and maintain order. One night, a Somali teenager was found hiding near their base. They assumed that he was trying to steal their rations. Then 3 members of the Canadian Airborne Regiment tortured and sodomized him. By morning, he was dead. At least 100 members of the unit heard the teenager's cries for help, but did nothing to stop him. A journalist happened to be on base. He wrote an article exposing the incident, which eventually led to the unit being disbanded. So I tell that story because 15 years later, as my CSM at RLA, Duke openly bragged about how his airborne unit was disbanded for torture. He told stories about shooting at waves of Somalis, and he'd say in front of everybody stuff like, "Your parents are from the armpit of the world." While working on this video, I made a Facebook account to reconnect with people from the school, and I had multiple people tell me without being prompted that, "Oh yeah, one of my core memories is remembering Duke being insanely racist towards you." One day he showed everybody the movie Black Hawk Down. So there's a slur in that movie that the US Special Forces use for Somalis, and it's skinny. And that quickly became my nickname, which honestly I wasn't even that bothered by. I kind of liked having a nickname. So I tried to claim the nickname as my own, basically. And I started writing it in a notebook in a graffiti style that one of my friends was teaching me. And the school punished me with labor. Then they gave me an essay to read about the glorious Somali people, which they had me write a report on. So the irony was pretty rich. They showed the movie, everybody started calling me a slur from it, I tried to reclaim it, and I was punished for it. So this next part sounds really made up, but I promise it's true. So midway through my first year, CSM Duke threw a flashbang into another staff member's office as a joke. The staff member allegedly suffered temporary hearing loss and was taken to the hospital. Duke was fired shortly after that, and I didn't see him again until I made a Facebook account for this project. When I saw him, I messaged him and I asked him, "Hey, were you really..."
You're from Canada wearing Trump, bro. Did y'all see the Twitter shit about all the American Twitter accounts being from like Israel, Palestine, not Palestine, Israel, just the Middle East and shit like that, Canada, all these crazy fucking countries and shit, but America, and then you got niggas always promoting Trump, but they not from fucking America.
Fired for throwing a flashbang? And to my surprise, he replied the next day. "Yes, but I was quitting anyway, and I was sick of him bullying the boys. Quite the explosion. Tough guy shit his pants. How you doing, young man? Staying safe listening to Nick Fuentes?" Crying laughing emoji. I told him that I was making a video about the school, and he said, "Make sure to include the legend, CSM Duke." He offered to do an interview, but then he stopped responding to my messages. This video is sponsored by Raycon. I've been running a lot lately, and I have this terrible habit of destroying earbuds. They fall out and die fast or just disappear. But a few months ago, I switched to Raycon, and they'll be supporting the channel, so thank you. After being at RLA for a year and a half, the school decided that I was performing so poorly that they put me on a special program. Part of the special program was a bland meal diet. So every day for about 2 months, breakfast was a slice of bread with a boiled egg. For lunch, canned tuna, a slice of bread and an apple. For dinner, dried...
This nigga was eating like jail. Oh my god.
with boiled chicken.
My nigga, you had no way to contact your fucking parents?
Meal outside while standing up If we didn't finish every bite, it was cling wrapped and put in the fridge to be served to us at an even colder temperature the next meal. Every day after lunch, we did a 15. A 15 was 45 minutes of nonstop PT, which is physical training. It was basically high intensity interval training. So 100 burpees followed by 100 jumping jacks, followed by 100 mountain climbers, and then a 400-meter sprint. And then it was like, get to the ground, roll, roll, roll. And the whole point is to make you puke tuna. So they'll feed you and then just make you do this in a circuit for 45 minutes straight. I was probably burning like 5,000 calories a day through exercise and labor, while eating maybe 1,000 calories a day. The food was so unappetizing, repetitive, and cold that I didn't want to eat it, even though I was
That's jail. That's jail. If you don't want to eat the food, that's jail.
starving.
That
After
niggas
a
is
month and a
traded
half of
food.
that, I was more mentally and physically exhausted than I've ever been in my entire life. As an adult, I now know that it was because I was burning too many calories without eating enough food. I remember being like just depleted, completely exhausted, and I was sitting in the washroom stall in a mess hall with the toilet seat down. And I just didn't want to move from that position at all. Then a guy named Sean McCarthy, he was a kid who arrived at the school the same day that I did. He handed me a raisin scone from underneath the stall. He had taken it from the mess hall and had wrapped it in a napkin for me. You see, McCarthy wasn't on the special program, so his meals were normal meals, the meals that everybody else got, which admittedly were pretty good. The thing that sticks with me about that story is I didn't say anything to him about how drained I was feeling. He just saw what was happening and was thoughtful enough to do that for me.
Genuine person.
That was 16 years ago, and I still remember the taste of that scone. It was the best thing I've ever eaten in my entire life. I haven't spoken to Sean McCarthy in over a decade, but hey man, if you're out there, I'll never forget that act of kindness. I still truly appreciate it to this day. During the special program, I started thinking about going AWOL. Legally, the school had to let us go home for 2 weeks during the Christmas stand down. So I decided as soon as I got home, I wouldn't go back. I'd run away from home and not go back. A friend said that I could stay at his mom's place, but that fell through. So I ended up sleeping in a church and then couch surfed for a few days until I gave up and took the bus home. When I got back home, I hid under my bed because I didn't want to go back to the school. And I'm not sure how, but my mom found me. She said that she kind of just sensed my presence. I told her that I refused to go back to RLA. I didn't even really fully articulate why. Instead, I just kept repeating that I'm not going back. A little while later, my parents tried to trick me into going back to the school, saying that we were driving to Niagara Falls. By the time I realized what was happening, we were only 15 minutes away from the campus. I yelled until my mom pulled over. Then I opened the car door and sprinted away. I'm not sure when they got there, but a police cruiser followed me and cornered me in a ditch. The cops tried to calm me down. One of the cops talked about how he almost cried while watching the school's annual parade because of how much the boys had turned their lives around. Eerily, a year later, another RLA student died when his parents tried to drive him back to the school, and he jumped out of the car to run away, just like I did. Next thing I knew, I was in the school's administration building. I sat in a chair and refused to get up as staff members tried to convince me to follow them back to the barracks. Eventually, the staff members realized that I wouldn't go with them, so my parents just took me back home. I didn't know this at the time, but since I just turned 16 years old, they actually couldn't force me to stay there. I should add that I don't blame my parents for trying to take me back to RLA. They just thought it was the best thing for me. And when I wanted to leave, I didn't really articulate why I was miserable. I just kept saying I don't want to go back. After I went back home, I just ended up going back to RLA after 2 months. After only a month back at RLA,
Guys, hold on. I know I'm not letting this play, but he's confusing me. He's stressing me out. Yeah, this nigga's stressing me the fuck out, boys. I'm not gonna lie, this nigga just pissed me the fuck off. Holy shit, this nigga just pissed me the fuck off. Let's let these niggas coming in my stream, bro. No, like, a report. Sorry, we got a
Hey,
random
I got in a
chat. Had
fight
a
with another
reporter.
student, and I was kicked out of the school. Thinking back, they were looking for any reason to get rid of me. I mean, students were stabbing each other at RLA. There were fights every day, blanket parties. No one got kicked out of the school for fighting except for me. Now, here's a strange part of the story. When they brought us into Bowman's office to have a meeting about the fight, he said, "What happens when I tell the boy's parents that a black Muslim hit their son?" I honestly still have no clue why he said that. The kid I got into a fight with was white, but it was just such a bizarre statement. I remember everybody in the room just kind of going silent and being stunned, like, did you just say that? I honestly still have no clue why he said that. The Now, here's a strange part of the story. When they brought us into Bowman's office to have a meeting about the fight, he said, "What happens when I tell the boy's parents that a black Muslim hit their son?" I honestly still have no clue why he said that. The kid I got into a fight with was white, but it was just such a bizarre statement. I remember everybody in the room just kind of going silent and being stunned, like, did you just say that? Why? So anyway, that's how I got kicked out of Robert Land Academy. And as soon as I got back home, it wasn't long before I started playing World of Warcraft again. Needless to say, I mean, I don't really think that school was very effective. In my entire time at RLA, I never spoke to a single psychologist or a counselor because there weren't any. I recall that there was one kid who punched through plexiglass out of frustration, and he sliced his arm open and had to be taken to the hospital. He'd freak out constantly over the smallest things. He clearly needed someone to talk to, but there was never a counselor who asked him what was wrong. The school just kept physically punishing him as if that would change anything. It was such an archaic system. I mean, even prisons have counselors. RLA was incorporated under the name the Creative Center for Learning Disabilities. In early marketing, Bowman
You know,
told
got counselors, you got psychiatric help, but you barely got.
newspapers, "We take the kids other people have given up on." But in practice, RLA rejected the notion that learning and behavioral disorders actually existed. To them, every issue was a character flaw that could be beaten out with physical discipline. Robert Land Academy announced that it was closing for good in April 2025. The school said that they were shutting their doors because of the decline in enrollment. The announcement came after millions of dollars in lawsuits. Recently, I returned to the school for the first time in 16 years. RLA still stands almost identically to how I remember it.